All right, so let's get started. So I'm using the latest version 15.2.3 program, and that can be downloaded from our webpage. You can also go to our downloads page and see all the different things we've done to this latest version. But the framing system screen, so we'll go to framing systems here. And hopefully you can see my screen. I'm going to double check that I'm sharing it. Yeah. So the framing system screen has pretty much remained unchanged for quite a while. We've added some features, little features. So as you know, the frames are listed. They can be organized here. We went through some of this in the last webinar. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick this first one. It looks like it's an 1 3/4 by 4 for 1/4" glass system screw spline. And I'm going to edit this system. Oh, and we're using the TrueLight aluminum catalog, so that's what we're using now. I'm going to double click on this to fill the screen. So, and this time we're going to talk, last webinar we talked about this window here with all the profiles and settings and the way the head and cylinder cut and all that. So now we're talking about stock length material. So these two things are very closely related. So any profile of metal that's entered here has to have a correlating part number. So if changes are made to profiles, chances are there's different part numbers involved. So this screen is really the heart of where all the parts and optimization and all that information comes from. So whatever parts show up in the optimizer, with the exception of door and entrance parts. So this is any basic frame related part. And in this case, stock lengths. So the other two tabs here we'll cover in the next seminar after this in 2 weeks. And this one, so for the optimizer, this is where the optimizer is getting all its part numbers. And also when you're doing your CAD detail or your shop drawings, this is where the details are coming from. It knows what detail to show. So since I'm on that topic, let's go ahead and cover that real quick. So each member, we try to do it in columns here. Each member in this screen, so we start with head, sill, horizontal, vertical, wall jambs, and then there's the other horizontals. You can have up to 4 horizontals. There's a standard horizontal and then 3 optional horizontals. Now, we had to kind of stop somewhere, so we have details for the second horizontal, but not for the third and fourth. So you would have to import those manually, I guess, if you got into an elevation where you're using up to the 4 full horizontals. So what this does is the name of the detail, and let me just show you where these are real quick. So if we go to our C drive and we go to our WinBidPro folder, each manufacturer has its own folder. So we've got our TrueLight, and then each manufacturer has its own detail folder. Now, some manufacturers don't have details with us. They just didn't have time to give them to us, or they didn't have them created yet. So some of the smaller ones, all the major manufacturers do. And you'll notice there's a folder. So for head file name, it begins with B1. So we're looking for, it's not case sensitive, so it doesn't matter if it's upper or lowercase. So now this means inside a B1 folder, we're looking for a 10.dwg file. And there it is right there. So here's some other files that are for this same type of framing system. So this is physically where the files are located on your hard drive. And all we're telling our program is for this framing system, this 1 3/4 by 4, CG400 in this case, for this particular head, the detail file has this name and is in this folder. And that's what we're telling this window right here. And it's the same concept for all these different components. So now the label. So if a manufacturer has like a system detail or system drawing that shows all the different details with an elevation and they're already labeled, then you can just use the same labels that they've already used in those CAD drawings. So that's why some of these already have some different labels. Like a lot of times you'll see a 1 for a head or a 1 for a jam, but TrueLight's decided to label in this way. So I can hit view here, and this is how I can see that detail just real briefly, and I can even print it right here. for that head material. So this is a way of checking, am I using the right part number? So according to the manufacturer, the head component, the main head component is a CG400, and we've got our gasket material, but and it's a -1. And I'm thinking this filler piece, this is a one-piece head, and then it's got this filler that is the 400-10. Now, it's surprising they don't show it in their detail, but different manufacturers show different things. So see how this detail has a 10 already on it? That would be because of this. It's showing that detail because we put that label in there. So now, or actually, I'm sorry, that DWG drawing has a 10, which is why this 10 is in the label. And then when the elevation drawing shows labels, that 10 will show up on the head for the elevation drawing, so it will match the detail. So if we hit edit, that's going to open the CAD program that comes with our software, and it will open that drawing. And this is something we can use to edit this drawing and then save it again. So this is the free CAD program that comes with your GDS software. It allows a lot of things. You can change text, add text, scale, change colors. There's not a lot of documentation on it, so we don't really offer a lot of support for it, unfortunately. But it's something to get you by if you're familiar with CAD. If you're not familiar with CAD, we recommend you get a full-blown CAD program that has good documentation. Okay, so back to that. That's a way for me to verify what part numbers a manufacturer is listing for a certain component, and it's also a way to verify that I have the right detail configured for a certain component. Now, here's something. So you've got up to 10 fields per component. So usually you've got 3 or 4 parts at the most for a certain component. Now in this case, before we get into the little symbols here, there is a tips button in a lot of our windows, and the tip button is important in this screen because it talks about the greater than and less than symbols, which you see right here is a less than symbol. Those are important. It talks about the asterisks, and then it talks about browsing for the CAD file. So if you want to change the CAD file, you can double-click in this field, and that's how you can browse your folders and pick a different file. That's also how you would assign a new file if there's not one already. So in this field here, I can double-click, and it's going to open up, hopefully, a window that lets me browse my hard drive, and then I can pick a different file, or pick a file for that field. So for some reason, it's acting kind of slow on my computer. So bear with me here. So this symbol here, I'm just going to talk about this as doing its thing. We've got 3 part numbers. One of them is we're telling it to subtract. What are we subtracting here? Okay, I don't know why that took so long, but that's how I would browse for a detail. And then I pick a certain DWG, and I hit open, and then it adds it to this little field right here. So that's how I can add a different detail if you've downloaded one from the internet, if you've created one of your own. It's really easy to configure your framing system here with different details if you need to. Okay, so this is telling our software that anytime the sill uses a CG400-3 part, that you need to subtract 0.03125, which is it's so many 16ths, I don't have time to figure that one out. But we're telling you to subtract that much from that piece of material, that cut size, whenever it's used for the sill. So we would see that in the optimizer. We would see that a CG400 would be the full sill daylight width because it's being interrupted by verticals. And then we would see that this part number is so much shorter. So you'll see that in the optimizer. And then it's important to know that all these materials up here, so the head, the sill, the horizontals, these are all interrupted by verticals, always. So whatever part numbers you enter in these columns here are always going to be interrupted by verticals. If you have components that are continuous, like a sill receptor, head receptor, face cover, even a horizontal cover. Anything that is not interrupted by verticals needs to be entered down here. So a CAN system, any system that has SIL receptor or a SIL CAN or SIL flashing, that material would have to be entered here. If any of that is entered up here, it's going to be interrupted by verticals. So that's always important to keep in mind. You can have up to 10 parts in here. You'd never really do that for any kind of receptor or CAN, but that's allowed. So keep that in mind. So anything in this box right here, cover and receptor part numbers, is always continuous from wall to wall. Now the exceptions are, you can tell it certain things in this window here, in this first window. So review that last webinar or some of our other videos, but you can actually interrupt a subsil or a head can by checking these boxes here if you need to. So not the verticals though, just the jams, door jams or wall jams. So that's the exception, but otherwise these are all continuous, these are all interrupted. So, and obviously verticals are always continuous and jams as well. So in a nutshell, so the asterisks, I can say if I need 2 of these parts, in this case, we can view it right here. So this part's just a one piece with a back filler, so I wouldn't need 2 of them. But if I ever needed 2 of a certain wall jam part that 2 snaps, 2 identical pieces snap together, rather than typing the part twice, I would just put a ×2 here. So whenever I do that in this screen, anywhere in the screen here, it doubles the part basically, or I can say ×4, and it's going to give me 4 of that exact same part. So that's what the asterisk is for. And again, so the horizontal 2, 3, and 4, there's the standard horizontal, and in this case we told it to deduct a certain amount from each cut. So if I want a different horizontal, like let's say this is my 1 3/4 by 4, if this needs to be a 4 by 4 and this one needs to be a 2.5 by 4, we can vary the profiles over on this screen here, and that's what all these 3 fields are for. That's how we determine the profile and how it's drawn. But then the part numbers themselves, which is what this whole screen's for, is determined by what's entered into these windows. So now I can click in this field and just type the part in. If I type a part that it doesn't recognize, I can add it, or I can say, no, that's not the part I want. So I want to delete that. And then I can actually come down here in this little right-click area, this little rounded box here. I can right-click, and I can go to my parts window. And this is how I can just look up a part. And if I don't know the part offhand, but I know it's a horizontal, then all these parts have the word horizontal in them. So it's a CG400 intermediate horizontal, and which one are we using? We're using the 400-7, or did we use the -6? Yeah, we are using the -6. So let's just say we want to use a different one, like 450 horizontal. I can add that just by clicking Insert Part. So now I've added that. I can also just type another part number in. So you get the idea. This little right-click is on a lot of different screens in our program, in the doors, door frame screens, in the alternate material screen, all those things where you're adding part numbers. You can actually get to the parts list. First thing you want to do is click in the field where you want the part to go. The next thing is right-click in this little area where the red text is. And then you can just start searching for parts. You can also add a new part here, and you can say, big horizontal. You can call it whatever you want. And then you can put your pricing in. So this is just adding a new part. You can do, your stock length price. It's a stock part. It's 289 stock length. It's 1 3/4. Let's just say it's a 2.5. And this is more for finding the part than anything, because the profile is actually entered. Oh, it needs a description. So large horizontal. So I've added that part. You can see it down here with a little arrow next to it, and now I can insert it into my. So there's a couple ways to add parts. I could have typed that all in there and said, yes, I want to add it, and then I could have filled in the different fields. Or I can right-click, go to my parts list, add it there, and then insert it. So there's a couple ways to do that. So that's how you would add parts to your framing system. And we always recommend adding parts before you get into your job, because each elevation you add, if you're using the same framing system, it's picking up the parts from the previous elevation. So that's kind of a trick that's covered in some other videos. But like, let's say I'm on elevation 2 here, and I'm using 1 3/4 by 4, it's a CG450, and I hit next. It's going to pick up all the parts we're using. So this brings us to the difference between the master parts and the elevation parts. And we covered this in the last video a little bit, but, or webinar. But so here we have our list of frames. These are all our standard frames for this manufacturer. We can add to it, we can delete it, we can edit and change things and all that. So whatever we do in this list, it's always there as the master list in this manufacturer catalog. But after we create a job and we add elevations, a separate copy of that framing system is saved. So in this case, if I want to make changes to just this elevation, I'm going to hit Edit Ele Frame Sys. And it brings up just the framing system for this elevation. I don't see the entire list anymore. So really I see my profile and all the configurations, and then I also see the part numbers. Now, this is where for just this, you'll notice it's a different framing system, but if I would have added anything to the master framing system just now for this particular frame, it won't show up in the elevation because I've already created this job and the elevation, so it's already made its own separate copy. So anything I do in this elevation, like if I want to add some filler piece, like let's see what we're looking at. So this one doesn't have a filler in that case. So it's a good way to kind of confirm what we're looking at. But if I just wanted to add a part, let's say the horizontal 2 part again, I click in there, I right click, I'm going to go to horizontal, and I'll just click down here to 501. So I'm going to insert that part. Now, I've only added that part to this elevation for this framing system for this elevation. If I go back to the first elevation now, and they're both using the same system, CG450, 1 3/4 by 4.5. Now if I edit the framing system for this one, and I go up here, I don't see that horizontal 2 part. So you see how they're separate. If I change one elevation, it doesn't change the other one. So it's good, but you have to know how it works to be happy with it. So here's what I was going to show you. So now we're on elevation 2. We're going to jump back into the screen just to confirm that our part's there that we added, a horizontal 2 part. So same thing goes with any of these things, whether it's the detail name, glazing adapter, any of that stuff. It's all discretely saved to this elevation if that's where you're clicking the edit button. And that same button is available right here under elevations, Ele Frame Sys. So it does the same thing as this. It's just 2 different places. So now if I want to create a new elevation, I hit next. This is where I would name my elevation, 3rd ele. It's going to use the exact same framing system. So what it's doing though is using a copy of the framing system from the previous elevation. So it's going to take a copy of the elevation frame from sort 2, which was the 2nd elevation, and use it for this 3rd one. So now I am going to just make an elevation that's so wide and so tall. And now I just want to show you that it's copied over what we put into the 2nd elevation. So there's that 2nd horizontal part. So if you don't want it to do that, if you make changes to an elevation and you don't want it to copy over all those changes to the next sequential elevation, the next one in sequence, then you would have to actually select a different framing system rather than the one it automatically came up with when you're adding the elevation. So if you remember when when I was here, it says this is the elevator, or this is the framing system it's going to use. If you just click OK, it's taking a copy of that previous elevations frame. If you hit select frame, you can go back to the same exact frame and pick it from the master, or you can pick a totally different frame. If you pick it from the master, it's also not going to use the previous elevations information. It's going to get whatever's in the master list. So you have a lot of control with it. You just have to know, what it's doing and how to go about entering your elevation, your elevations. So let's jump back to the, doesn't matter which one now. We're looking at the elevation framing system. We're going to jump back to stock length material. And you notice, let's see here. So a lot of times you're going to want details for individual components. But you can also have a system detail. Now, a system detail, some manufacturers have like an elevation, a sample elevation with all the details around it. So that would be a file, a CAD drawing that has a complete system set of details. So let's try. I'm going to double click in here. I'm going to show you a setting that's kind of a secret here. I'm not sure what this one is. Let's just open it and see. And then we'll view it. Well, let's pretend like that's a system detail. And it's curtain wall. But so what the point of this is, if you generate shop drawings, it's going to pull all these details in and the system detail. So chances are you don't want both. You want one or the other. If you have a system detail and that's all you wanted to pull in when you do your shop drawings, then there's a way to tell the program to do that. So we go into drawing settings under the shop drawing window. And then we go to right here. So it says only show system details. So now if I do that and I hit OK, and now I go to my shop drawings, it's going to generate the shop drawing files. So each of the elevations are here. And then I hit next set, and now I see my system detail. So if I didn't check that box, let's go do that. If I go back to drawing settings, I uncheck the box that says only show system detail. It should show me all of the individual details for this job. So it's going to compile the elevations, it's going to compile the details. The first set of drawings is the elevations. The next set is details. So what it wasn't supposed to do was show me that. So it shows me all the individual details and the system. So let's see where we are here. 1/3. Yeah, so it looks like that's half working. So I'm going to make a note of that and make sure it's not. So what it should have done is it only showed us the, unless that's the way it was intended to work. Now I kind of forget, to be honest. But I'm thinking that's not really good, because if you already have individual details, it doesn't need to show the system one. So I'm going to fix that so it doesn't do that anymore in the next update. So the alternative is you just get rid of the system. Oops, I didn't want to. You can just delete the file, and now, of course, it won't show it. Okay, so let's talk more about this little section down here. The glazing adapter and glass stop part numbers. Now, to explain that, let's go back to the drawing. In the drawing, there's a stop tab. Now, there's a way to add glass stops to each daylight or selected daylights. So let's say you want to put glass stops in all these, or maybe just the first panel. Or you want to put, in this case, you want to put glazing adapter. So let's say this panel is taking, if it's a 1-inch system and you only want to put spandrel or 1/4-inch glass in a certain panel, this is where you would hit apply adapters. And let me go back here. So we're going to go back, and this is where I just might jump up here and hit eleframe sys. So now for this particular elevation, I'm going to go back over here. Oh, and there's 2 components to the stops. The adapters have no reveal, so there's no change in daylight opening when you use the glazing adapter, but there is for glass stops. So let's say you have 1/4-inch glass stop that, or a 1/2 inch, so we can see it there. So we have 1/2 inch glass stop that we want all around to whatever daylight opening that we want to apply it to. Now the alternative, something new that we added, this was in the last webinar, you can actually check this box, and this particular framing system would automatically add glass stops to all daylights. So that's kind of a newer feature. But in this case, I'm going to specify what panel or what daylight it goes into. So there's two components. There's the profile, which is how it's drawn on the drawing, and then there's the part numbers. So again, I would click in here. Let's say I click in here for adapter, and you can see the difference. So door adapter, here's some glazing adapter here. So let's insert that. So that's my glazing adapter. Now let's do stop. So here's some glass stops here. Doesn't matter. I'm just showing you how to put the part numbers in. And then I can actually just highlight this, copy, and paste. My Control-C, Control-V, kind of copy and paste. So now I've got my profiles in the previous tab. I've got my part numbers here. And I'm going to click OK. The next step is to actually add those. So I'm going to say I only want it from panel 1 to 1. So in one panel, I want glass stop from a hideout. So this is where you specify where it's going. If there's no horizontals, then it doesn't matter. All you're doing is full height. So it's 0 to 120. And then I'm telling it here where I want these stops to go. Left, right, top, bottom. So let's first apply glass stops to this first panel. And you see this like magenta glass stop that it added. So that's that 1/2 inch profile. It's changed our daylight opening, so the glass would reflect that smaller size. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to 100% on the drawing here. We're going to add adapter, and it's the same concept, except let's add it to the 5th one. So from 5 to 5, from 0 to 120. And we're going to add adapter all around. In the next version of our program, we're going to make this a lot easier to do, where you can probably just click on the daylights. But for some reason, this is how we originally designed it. So I'm going to add adapter. Now, you'll notice there's no drawing difference with the adapter. So it's kind of weird, because since it doesn't affect the daylight, that means the drawing doesn't have anything to draw. So we're going to have to figure that out in the future. But do know that it will be calculated in the stock length in the cut list. So let's check real quick. So this is our 3rd elevation. We're going to go back to our elevation system. And for our adapter, we are using 81009. So let's go ahead and go to our optimizer. We're going to get elevation parts. And this is where all our stock lengths are coming up. Here's the 81009 right here. So there's two pieces at 37, which is the width, and 7/8, and then there's the length pieces. So you see that our adapter is being used. Our glass stop is also being, and we call it adapter as the part type, so it is easy to pick out. Pretty sure we call the glass stop something too. What do we call that? There it is. So glass stop horizontal, glass stop vertical. And there's two pieces of each of those. So you see that those, we've added them to that stock length parts window, and now they're showing up in the optimizer. So there's your kind of direct correlation. Now I never optimized, so it's telling me there's no stock lengths. So that's important to know. When you add something like that, you always have to make sure that the part number is associated to the profile that you're giving it. And the only exception there is the glazing adapter, because there is no profile. So I think that covers everything in this screen. So remember the tips little button. It's going to help you with the little secrets like the greater than, less than, the asterisk for ×2 or ×3 if you want multiple quantities of the same exact part in the same size. So this greater than, less than is just a key to being able to adjust a certain part cut size for a given component. So it doesn't apply to all seal material. It only applies it to whatever part you tell it to. So that's something that you can utilize later if it's easier to, to snap in a filler piece because it's a tiny bit shorter, or whatever you need to do. If it needs to extend up into. Now, okay, there's one exception, and I'm just about to end here, but one exception is there's a value here that you can add, and this was covered in the last webinar. That's an add deduct for verticals and jams. So I could actually tell it that all my jams need to be greater than 1.25 inches, and I can tell it all my verticals need to be greater than. So I could do that, but I would have to put it under each part number if that's something I want that entire component to be extended that length. So the reason we added that to here is because it's easier. You just put that number in once, it's going to apply it to all verticals and jams. If it is something that's unique to a specific part for a given component, then that's where you would use the greater than symbol here. So hopefully that clarifies that part of it. So that's the stock length tab in a nutshell. And as I say, that's kind of a key component to the WinBidPro, the GDS software, because whatever shows up in your cut list is coming from here. The exception is the door frame and door leaf screens are very similar in format to this. They have their own stock length parts as well. They can be configured with those. So those can also show up in the cut list. But for your standard frame, elevation frame, this is where it all comes from. So that is, that's it for this tab.